how is that going to be possible? Remember that young people, especially in developing countries, are people who are not, advantaged in terms of having the required wherewithal and resources to, amplify, what they do and make it to be global. All right. Remember that, you know, the generation before us, uh, you know, the generation of our fathers, they are the ones who are still in control of, the key economic and financial, sectors of the society. All right. Okay. They are the ones who still are the movers and shakers of the economy. Okay. So, I'm yet to see a young person, all right, especially below 40, all right, who, apart from the new president, the current president of, I think it's Senegal or something, but I don't think he's below 40, all right? Yes. And that's a very exceptional and rare occasion, all right? Especially in Africa, for someone of his age to assume the mountain of leadership in a country. So, apart from that example, are there or is there any other place in the world where young people, where youths are allowed to hold positions of authority that will enable them influence or implement this love, vision, and responsibility that's been shifted to them by the United Nations? All right. Okay. So the question is amplifying our voices. How can we do it with what we have at our beck and call, with the resources we have, with all the challenges that we have in our society? All right. I use myself as an example. I'm a songwriter, singer, composer, producer, right? And lately, there's something that I'm doing in the schools that I work with. Okay, I try to identify young people, very young. I work in a high school, okay, and there are young people who are exceptionally good, when it comes to music. All right, what I do is to, of course, they don't understand the nitty gritties and intricacies that has to do with the 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 job of an artist, a music artist. All right, so I try to compose this song and give it to them and said, you sing it, all right? All right. So that's what the step we're taking, because that's the only encouragement I can give them, because I've identified what the first thing I do everywhere I go is to look out for people who are very gifted in music, all right? And then see how I can support them, all right? So of course they're very young. They won't be able, they don't even know what composition of songs, is, all right? So and what I do is to help them to use my platform to show the world, look at this young boy, look at this young girl, look at how blessed this and talented this person is. Is there nothing we can do to support them? That's the only way I can help amplify their voices, through what I do. All right. So have you seen it? So when you're talking about amplifying the voice of young people, what are we doing in different small zones and areas that the world would enjoy? All right. That's this. And then leveraging, especially the social media and the conventional media, to help, make known those good things that we know how to do in our sub regions. Okay, so that's it. Amplifying our own voices. Okay, how can we do it? All right, with limited resources. Okay, the next thing we could do is creation of value. Creation of value, or what problems can we solve with our talent? That's the issue, the first issue. What problems can we solve with our talent? Okay, now, of course, we know we run a knowledge-based economy, all right, and problems are going to be solved with knowledge expertise, you know, and for instance, they talked about um, clean tech startups, okay, um, so how those of them that are computer graduates, okay, how would you help young people to begin to build apps, applications talked about the zero coding phenomenon in the application building these things. Okay, how are we going to help young people, especially in developing countries, to speedily key in and come up to terms with all these things that are happening in the developed world, developed countries of the world. All right, because you find out that in this zone that we live in, that I live in, okay, let me be specific. All right, these things are not well known. All right, yes, there's no you can't tell a boy in a high school, especially in where it is, you know, he or she wouldn't be very conversant with the use of you know the knowledge of robotic and AI and all those things. Okay, but it's something that is achievable. How can we be empowered to make these young people, all right, in our sphere of contacts to leverage technology of our time? We'll continue in a moment. I'm MC Licky Licky, and this is Isthmus TV. Now, in this large segment of our program today, we are going to be looking at, how we can take up this task individually. All right? Yes. Before we take it to the collective plane, all right? Let's see how we can start implementing these things on individual basis. What can an individual do to contribute to the realization of the goals of the United Nations of making the world a better place for everyone to live in and thrive? Okay, now, you know, there are things, fundamental things that, would have to be achieved, and that an individual will make a decision to achieve. The first thing is, we are held back because of the level of knowledge that we have, all right? Yes, there's the level of exposure, the level of the things that we know, expertise and skills that we know. Okay, so how can an individual take up the responsibility of knowing more by himself, not waiting for the government to organize a special seminar or for his or her school to organize a special program, where people who are exposed technologically will come and teach them the things that they do not know, right? How can is it possible for a young person to carry out the research on his own or her own to find out how to solve problems? That is a very difficult thing for young people to do, especially things that do not have, immediate financial gain, right? Yes, things that would have to take time, like a seed that you have to be sown and nurtured and watered before you begin to reap its fruit. That is a difficult thing for young people to do, right? How can young people be made to understand that it's only when they sit down and build enduring, make enduring investments on themselves that they'll be able to build wealth, all right? It's not going to be gotten by accident, all right? It's not going to be you stumble over a fortune and then you become a rich person. No, no, no. It has to do with taking time to build a system, all right, that will pay you money for generations to come, right? Youth making the decision to sit down and look for problems to solve. That's number one. All right. There are also, these cultural orientation issues. All right. For instance, in my own world, in my own zone where I live, there are certain things that women prior to this time are not supposed to do. All right. Yes. Mm. You see, there are some profession that are exclusively for men. You have seen it. So how are we working hard to break those barriers that's been erected, for us? And then we talk about the issue of religion, all right? Religious practices. What are we doing to live above these barriers that have been set for young people of like contemporary time? And then there's also this issue of dishonesty, because the United Nations, is looking at it, making the world a global village where people from different backgrounds will be able to interact with people from another background, or totally. Have you seen it? Then the issue of trust is always always there. It's always a hindrance or an impediment. All right. So people don't easily trust people that they do not know or not seeing physically. All right. For instance, that's something I'm trying to achieve with my, channel. I recently told people from, other countries to act as my, online reporters. Be able to tell because there's a program I want to start. Okay, so I'm looking for volunteers from all around the world who'll be able to give me 1 or 2 minutes clips of what is happening in their capital cities. For those of them in Paris, those of them in the United States, New York. We're able to just you know volunteer to give me on a weekly basis, um, 1 or 2 minutes video about the recent events in their localities. But there's this trust issue. They're looking at me and look at this fraudster from Nigeria, but they didn't know. They don't know that it's not a fraud thing. Okay, it's something I'm trying to derive a change. Okay, the way I can, but there's this issue of trust. You know, in making the world a global village, how easily can you convince people from other climes, all right, to buy into the idea that you have? That's a very big problem. All right. So, having said that, it's the responsibility of every young person to ensure that he or she will begin to drive the change that is needed in his or her environment with whatever he has or she has at the moment. This is where we're going to be ending this week's episode of Isthmus Daily Rendezvous. My name is MC Leaky and this is Isthmus TV.